So here we are, the Man to Man podcast video version or remote version. So this is our first one. We're trying it here.
Yes.
Remote. Mike is Mike Makowski, Dennis Lemire. Mike is in Oklahoma. I'm still up here in Minnesota for the time being, and that's how we're gonna do it. So this is something new. We're gonna see how it goes. I'm happy that we can still do this,
I'm
but
excited. New adventure. This is good, man.
yeah,
Come
it's pretty
on.
cool. I don't know if you watched the last one, but so I got out on the road and I got to interview Dick Felch from our
So good.
um, basics and our becoming a kings. And man, I could tell you, I had people text me and call me that I didn't know watch the podcast even, and they're just like, dude, that guy was awesome.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. Everybody liked Dick, and it was neat talking to somebody like that who just brings in so much wisdom from so. I mean, this guy's been a Christian for longer than I've been alive. I mean, that's just so much wisdom that you can get from a guy like that. It's crazy. I think he's been a Christian for longer than you've been alive.
I think so. He's been out. You know what? That's the grit he has, and yet he's so humble. You
Mm-hmm.
know, such a humble guy. I love him, man. Like say when I grew up, I want to be like him for sure. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I had to like pull stuff out of him. When I would, there's times when I would say things and he's like, "Wow, I don't know about all that," and I'm like, "No, seriously, Dick. Like people want to hear what you have to say." It was so crazy how he was so humble, and
yeah.
it was so good. But anyway, so go back and watch that one if you didn't, because it's a great story, and what a good dude. And hopefully I can get out on the road and do more stuff like that, and then and we'll get you meeting new people down there, and then you can get out and interview some guys down there. So we'll mix it up a little bit, but we'll see. Now this will be our format. So we just because you moved, we haven't stopped doing things. I mean, still meeting with guys and mentoring and coaching guys, right? And I mean, and I've actually been doing some mentoring up here, which is interesting to me. Not something that I thought I would be doing, I guess. And you kept telling me, get ready. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll get ready. It's one of those things that you think someday, right, is when that's going to
Right.
happen, is someday, and it's been like now. So it's been kind of crazy, but there are things that come up, right? And I think it's interesting whenever we talk, there's always these themes that come up, and we've had podcasts before where we've talked about themes that come up, between the two of us when we're talking to people, or just in our groups even, because we have our groups of guys that we hang out with and that we regularly talk to, and there's just these themes that seem like they come up over and over and over again, and it definitely makes you stop and realize that either the world is pushing something onto guys, and so we're seeing this over and over, or God's trying to tell us, hey, focus on this, pay attention to this, right? And so one of those things I think we've been talking about, and maybe I'll let you kind of lead off with where your heart's been going and what you've been hearing, and then I'll kind of fill in around that.
Well, I mean, the thing that's so crazy about this, Denny, is when me and and even not just me and you, but when I talk to other men that are in these discipleship or mentoring or whatever the case may be, it's like you say, it seems to be a very familiar theme, no matter what state or no matter what condition any of these guys are in. And that to me tells me that there's either something that we got to pay attention to,
Mm-hmm.
or because God is moving on the hearts of men. I mean, he is just moving on the hearts of men.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, I don't think it's going to be, gosh, I've never experienced that before. Well, I don't know what you're talking about. I think it's going to be, oh, that's where I'm at. And that's what's happening right now. The 3 or 4 guys right now that I'm mentoring all basically are in different parts of life, but the same scenario is coming up over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned it in that one. You mentioned it the other day where it just seems like so many guys right now are just tapping out. They're
Mm-hmm.
just they just don't have a sense of direction. They're questioning their life. They're questioning the decisions that they make about life. Um, and when me and you were talking about that, you had a scenario that kind of came up that you thought this is what contributes to that. Remember what was that?
Right. Yeah. It's the idea, right, of if everything around you is being questioned, so everything you do is being questioned, if everything you think is being questioned, if everything that you think is right, and you're going the right direction and it's questioned, you know, it makes you start to doubt anything
Right,
effectively. And
right.
that's what I'm hearing a lot of, and even in myself a lot of times, and in different things where it really makes you start to question everything, because you start to lose trust in yourself,
Right.
is what it boils down to. And so then every decision that you make, you're not openly doubting yourself, because I think that that's where a lot of guys will be like, no, that's not me, right? Because they're not openly doubting themselves, but they are. They're subconsciously doubting themselves. And so it comes out in the words that they use, like you said, I don't know what's next in life. I don't have direction. I'm not hearing from God anymore, right? Or, I thought I heard from God, but I'm not exactly sure if he said that. um or
Yeah.
if it was just me, right? Again, it's that doubt, and it's
Yeah.
subtle, and it's constant. And
Yeah.
so, I don't know.
And what's even more, if I could jump in, Danny, is
Yeah.
I was listening to one of the podcasts from John Eldridge the other day, and he just said, human beings were not meant to know everything that's going on in the world.
Right.
He's like, God never meant us to know what's going on in Uganda and
Hmm.
people starving in Africa, and your next door neighbor who you don't even know, you find out stuff on Facebook, and
Right.
it's
Right.
there's so many opinions and so many things coming at us. I think this is contributing to this lack of confidence, because any suggestion or anything that I decide, I can find 10 things that'll tell me I'm wrong.
Right. Right.
Or
Yeah.
I'll have three people that'll say you're wrong.
Right. Right.
It's unbelievable now how you're right. We just get so stuck in this confusion, and because we're confused, we have a lack of confidence to make any steps forward, or do anything or say anything based off of, like I say, the amount of garbage and the amount of stuff that are in our world today. We were never meant to take all that on.
Right. It's
Oh,
very apparent right now, right? Because what's going on in Israel, right? And over in the Middle East. I mean, literally a constant scroll of information, just constant. And you're seeing the things flare up, around that. But yeah, we have this knowledge of what's going on constantly, of that, and it creates, again, this confusion, um and just overloading, I think. And I was talking to Garrett the other day, actually, and I don't think he'd have a problem with me sharing it, but he he said, it almost leads to a complacency, where he's like, oh, here we go again, it's another thing going on that we gotta pay attention to, or kind of keep in the back of your head. And so you get real numb to it, almost, to that mass of information that's coming at you. And and when you get numb to it, then you allow more. A lot of times you start to, turn the news channel on, or read the Facebook posts, or Twitter feeds, or whatever. And and then so you start to take in more and more and more of this information, because you're just numb to the fact of what is, and you don't know what it's doing to you.
and then what it's doing to you, though, is it's leading you into a place of despair.
Right.
That's what it does. It leads us into this place of despair. Like you say, just to the point of where gosh, I can't handle it. I can't do it anymore.
Mhm.
Is That's the other word that keeps coming up, is despair. Even my wife, talking to her on the phone the other day on her way home from work, said it was so quick. She was thinking about something at work, and it wasn't a big deal at all, but how quickly her mind went to despair.
Mhm.
And then John said the same thing
Right.
about it's a change of season and winter's coming soon. I was putting up the bikes and all I was putting the bike aways and I came to despair. It's just this confusion, there's despair. And when you said what you and Garrett said, the other word that keeps coming up is passivity or
Mhm.
passive, right? And when you think about it, that was from the very beginning. I mean,
Right.
when you had Adam and Eve and they're in the garden, they're walking with God, and then all of a sudden they get Eve gets introduced to the fruit, and then Eve, obviously was deceived, and all that kind of stuff. And she took a bite of the fruit, but the trippy thing is Adam was right there, elbow to
Mhm.
elbow with her, right? And he did nothing,
Right.
did
Right.
nothing, passive, and didn't
Right.
do anything, and then ate the apple, right? So I mean, this whole passivity thing, I think is something that we'll be able to talk about also because I was sitting in my chair actually earlier today thinking about it, and I got this statement. Now I know what passivity means and what's passive means, but I got this statement of just let it pass. Just
Mm.
well, whatever, let it pass. Kind of bowing out. Yeah, well, let it go.
Mm.
You know, uh, and so I think this is a big struggle with all of us, especially as men. And then on top of that, you've got all the stuff against masculinity, and you got taking gender away, and I mean, it's just non-stop right now, man. No wonder why we're so confused. No wonder why we're feeling despair.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and maybe we need to dive into that. I mean, I think it's in that verse, it's I mean it's literally, let's just look at that. So Genesis 3, right, is where we're at in this. And when we're looking at, if you look at Genesis 3, it's again, woman in the garden, serpent comes to her and says, woman said to the serpent, we may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God said, must not eat fruit. Serpent says, is that really true or whatever? And so verse 8, in the NIV says, then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. So God was like there.
Oh yeah,
I mean, he's just walking around in the garden. So at any time they could have been like, hey, God, is this like, what's going on here? What am I seeing? What am I, what is happening? Why would you tell us this? But then this, other serpent, tells us something else. What is going on? And they didn't. Like
it is.
they just didn't. They refused to do anything, right? And
There's some teaching out there that, in fact, I think it comes from John, where it says that that's how, that's a whole nother teaching, but it just says that's how powerful women are when it comes to being in a man's life, that he chose Eve over God at that point in time.
that is John. Actually, it's funny enough. I had a conversation with Tara about that not too long ago, and she was like, "Where does that come from?" And I'm like, I mean, look at Genesis 3, right? I mean, literally,
But what,
Adam
but
is there.
what's so great about it is God still pursued them, even though they hid. I
Right,
mean, that's the great thing about our God is like, he didn't come in saying, "What the heck did you do, you idiots?" He didn't come in. He's like, "Where are you guys? What's
right.
going on?" And that's what that's just one thing I love about our God, and that's why I think right now that's what God at this point in time is doing. He's pursuing us, but we have so much stuff going on in our lives and in our heads and in our minds. We think he's not around, you know.
Right. And where do you think that, I mean, so in the end, we've got the original, obviously we just talked about, with man kind of having that almost in us from the beginning, right? Like this willingness to kind of look the other direction sometimes, but also now you've got all of this information coming in at us. So, I mean, how is it that guys are supposed, I mean, to me it seems like you're kind of, the deck is sort of stacked against you. Here you're Adam. I mean, again, let's just go back to that story. Here you're Adam and you're in the garden, and God's like, even God says, it's probably not good that you're alone, right? I mean, like, he looks at man, and man's out there doing his thing, like naming animals and plants and stuff. And God looks down at him and he's like, yeah, you probably shouldn't be alone. Like, I'm going to make you a helper. Right. And so then he makes Eve, and here comes Eve. And, when John tells the story, like, I love the way John tells the story. John Eldridge tells the story in the basics, where he's like, this is a goddess.
Right.
Like, this is the perfect woman created to be this mate for Adam. And she's just suddenly there. And Adam's been like rabbit, giraffe, hippopotamus, like all day long. He's just like fern, oak tree, right? And he's just like, God, this sucks. Like, what? Are there anybody here for me? And then the next thing you know, here comes this perfect woman. And he's like, holy crap, right? Like, this is what I'm talking about now. Now we're here. And so this is what Adam's faced with. And so this woman says, here, eat this. And he's listening to this whole conversation between this woman and the serpent. And, and she's like, here, eat this. And he's like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, the Bible says later, Paul says that Eve was deceived, but Adam wasn't. Adam's sin was a choice that he made to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, Adam's sin was of the choice to follow that, to not lead, to not exert dominance over that. So he does this, and then the fall happens and all this stuff, right? And it starts all of these things that happen. So here you got Adam, who's faced with this back in the day, and all he's got is this one woman to distract him. And to take, now you have guys that have all of this stuff in front of them. I mean, and all of this things going on, and and work is pulling at you, and the kids are pulling at you, and I mean, it gets to be a lot sometimes. And then yet, like you said, you have all this information. It's I mean, it's not an easy situation, and I don't want to make light of it, because I feel like, a lot of guys are in this tough situation. So it feels like the deck is kind of stacked against us in this.
Yeah.
So you can't really fault, I think you said earlier, like, you can't fault guys for having that feeling, right? For feeling like, oh my gosh, I just don't know what's next. What am I supposed to be focusing on here? Like, holy crap, I don't know. I just feel lost. And then they just give up, and they're like, you know what? It's all too much. It's all too much. And then they just throw in the towel. So, where do you go with that? I mean, what do we do with that as guys? How do we make an adjustment and come out of that?
Well, I think, just some thoughts, and I know that this is going to take a few podcasts. I know that for a fact. But I think one thing for sure is that we need to be able to take a step back and take a look at what is real and what isn't, what is now and what isn't. We'll get into scripture about this, but the reality is that we got so much information that when we don't understand something, we look for other information about it. And it's like there's got to be a point where we have enough information on a certain topic that it's got a strong enough foundation that I don't care what everybody else is saying around me. This is what I go by. I think that's one of the things that you have to do as a man. You have to come to realize your core beliefs. You have to come and realize what you value. But I think that one thing that we want to talk about is confusion, despair, and passivity, because I think those are right now just the biggest things that are engaging. So what do we do with that? How do we stay away from being confused? How do we stay away from just being pulled to despair and being passive about things? And I really believe that it's time for us to start backing away from information and trusting in the information that we already have. We have to have a foundation in something. If we lose a foundation, we're toast. If we build a house on sand, the Bible says, right, it's going to fall. It's going to fall in the first storm. And so that's what I think is happening right now. And that's one of the things that when I was praying yesterday, it just really hit me that the enemy is perfectly putting stuff out there so that we will constantly be reaching, even when it comes to our relationship with God.
Right. Right.
When it comes to we're constantly trying to reach for him, and he's like, I'm right here, sitting next to you, Mike, right now. In fact, I'm in you.
Right.
in you, right? And so I think that's something that you and I will discuss a little bit further. How do we keep from constantly reaching for what we think is going to be better, what we think is going to help,
Hmm.
instead tapping back into what I learned in Sunday school when I was 7?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
But sadly enough, you're right. I mean, it's, there is so many guys want this, what's next, what's next, what's next. And it's like, what is now?
Exact. Come
What is
on.
going on now? I mean, what are you doing? What is happening right now? Why are we worried about what's next? Like, focus on the now.
Yeah.
God is working within you right now.
Yeah.
You might not know what he's doing, which I get it. It's frustrating. Sometimes it sucks. We all want answers, right? But you might not know what God is doing, but he's doing something. So do you believe that is the place to start, right? Do you believe God is doing something? Okay, then chill for a second. Try to figure out what it is that he's doing, right? Try to figure out where he's working in you right now, because
Yeah.
he's doing something, and I think you brought up those three things. And so I think that's important too. So these are the things that we, when sitting down and going, what is it that we see attacking guys on a regular basis right now? Confusion, despair, and passivity. And we talked a little bit about passivity, but I think we can dig into that even further. So the next three podcasts, I think that's what we'll plan on doing, right? Is we're going to dig into those three things that we feel are just attacking guys: confusion, despair, and passivity, and really kind of dig into what do we do to combat those, and what do we do to give guys some real tools to stand against that, and make some changes in their life, in how to do that biblically, and through some things that we've learned in our own lives.